Neuron Theory. There's a ton of books on behavior, there's a lot of psychology material, and I've come across maybe one or two neuron books. Networks especially. Dr. Gordon, I think from Harvard or Yale. And then some deep learning resources and a whole lot of room for thinking and thought about neurons. And spontaneous camera movement. Oh, that's nice. So there's some some people that are just blocking the stop interrupting my neurons. I'm serious. That's just so rude. It's just so obnoxious. So neurons. Neurons sometimes are the easy starting point for neuroscience. You go right to the neuron, right to the source. Kind of like with psychology, you go right to consciousness. And then behavior. Feed some stimulus, give some consciousness. The person receives the reward and then repeat the process in a very loop-like manner. And with neuroscience, going right to the neurons gets into anatomy and physiology immediately. Slowing down the process physically, but theoretically and mentally treating time as if those just go and get noticed easily. Going from the amygdala down to the toes, good gosh. Going from the cerebral cortex to the brainstem. There's a lot of energy involved, there's a lot of signals, there's a lot of words and descriptions doctors know. And people and folks like me who are researching have to slowly figure out along the way. So the theory has to do with where I'm at in my studies. Not having every word figured out and a similar kind of explanation as what I've been doing for the last 8 years, trying to figure out what the heck to do with neuroscience. The emotions involved, will I ever get to go to school? Will I ever accomplish any goals? And for this instance, neurons are kind of a self-learning part of the neuroscience I've been doing. So as an example, there's a neuron from when a person's born, growing up, a group, a set, a whole bunch of them. And these store information They store data, they store lots of stuff. The synapses connect to each of these. And the tricky part has to do with always being correct. There seems to be a conjuncture within neuroscience where the mathematician, brilliant chemistry, biology, statistics, light speed, undergraduate, determined, motivated, straight to medical school student gets to be in charge. A lot like the psychologist and the behavioralist. The psychologist, behavioralist. The professional who's got the clipboard, who knows where everyone's going, the police officer, the whoever is in charge of security and safety and well-being mentally. They already know what's happening. They've got everything figured out. So for neuroscience, the PhD, the PhD doctor, the medical doctor, they've got all the language to fit together what theoretically I'm trying to explain about a neuron starting from an early part of life and being a very heavily used part of the brain, receiving dopamine, receiving all kinds of neurotransmitters, and then deciding where to go, getting into networks, getting into other parts of descriptions. And a person stores math, calculus, trigonometry, algebra, MCAT studying, using myself as kind of a reference point for where I'm trying to end up in the future. And the faster and the more confused a person gets, at least myself, but slower and slower and slowly getting back to the subject on the video, personality, how these neurons get used starts to be relevant. I think of like a car and how the car gets used. Always filling it up with gas. Always repeating, similar to neurons. Always storing, always receiving new information and more up-to-date data. Current data. So a lot like the clock. Signals. indication. Okay, I've got 5 minutes to go. I've got to reach the end of my explanation for neuron theory. Everything I see, everything I hear, everything my hands feel, goes to the neurons, gets distributed in the body, goes from the body, gets distributed to the brain, gets processed, and then I have a conscious experience. The conscious experience in a relationship, going out on a date, gets stored in neurons as a memory. My consciousness book I'm working on now gets stored as a memory. What I'm learning, what I'm figuring out. And so the whole part of what I'm trying to figure out with neurons, with the theory, has to do with making it easier to identify potential neurons with choices, options, behavior with stimulus, preferences for consciousness. Not just now with the lava lamp, but back when I was little. And starting to see that kind of time in a neuron. And why I still like flashing lights, but why sirens still make me uneasy. Limits. The good consciousness limits, and then the bad limits when someone has to get arrested, when someone shoots someone over some drugs they were getting to make them so alive and aware. Not really an answer for the theory, aside from the intrigue with the neurons and the mystery involving, well, what's been with me my whole life and what's continuing to hold this information my brain's receiving from the books I'm reading. Where are they going? How are they going there? And maybe most importantly, why are they going there? To those neurons. The conversation quickly gets to a dead end. Potentially because of behavior. And maybe the only real benefits from this kind of theory and the control a person could have